In today's world, we live in the fallen times of degenerated materialism, ideological possession, and low-charge energy with consumption. We have become nihilistic consumers of the world with the intention of eating it all up as if we have the born right to do so. Where is the spark within, you could say, the creative charge for change within you, the vumos, or animal magnetism that burns for the expression and deliverance of the soul? The potential needs to be realised, and the ambition needs to be seen upon this very world. Thus, what can activate this spirit of man and his heroic passions within the people of humanity? What can make us realise that our ancestors within our blood cry for their vitality to be renewed into the modern world of today? What is it that will take us away from this culture crisis of confusion and dissolution? One way to do so is to realise the history of ancient wisdom. We need to go back, all the way back into the past, to understand what life was meant to be for our ancestors of valour and virility, and reapply it to our relative times of the modern 21st century. Thus, in this video, I will be taking a trip back to uncover what has been hiding in plain sight, you could say, what has been made unknown and unconscious from us that shall be made conscious today, and allow ourselves to open our eyes to the truth of what it is and means to have high charge potency. So let's start with some etymological language games for the intellectuals, let's say, some language games to understand the root, meaning and truth behind the types of words that developed from the Indo-Europeans. In Latin, for example, there is a word called ludere. Ludere is how it's spelled. Ludere means to play or to fight. Now, if you look into the English words that use the word lewd, you have the following, such as these: conclude, collude, allude, etc. Now, if you look into these words, all of these words have a very similar etymological meaning behind them, which refers to the act of resolution or resolvement. That to go out and play resolves a situation, to go out and fight resolves a situation, and the situation in which these acts resolve is that of the spirit, you could say, the passions and the lowered energies, of the lowered passions, of the energies within the soul that lie within the body. The energies which are those, when realised, bring forth a form of high charge potency, you could say. Thus, to play or to fight would be seen as the resolvement of the soul between two forces within the individual, or between individuals themselves, unifying the body and the mind into a harmonious balance of expression and passion. This is what you could call, and what Nietzsche often referred to as, like, the Dionysian charge, or the Dionysian affirmation of life. Within that lies deep down within the body. The energy which isn't constricted by rationalizations, it is the outpouring instead, the outpouring of the passions in love, in dance, and found within bravery. So this one Latin word from the Indo-Europeans, all the way back from ancient times, which was allowed to craft the future languages of today, and especially English, tells us a lot about the truth in some way or form, that to find meaning, to be a happier person, one needs to often let go from the intellectual mind, let go from the rationalizations, which are the processes that are bringing you back into anxiety and fear, that is holding you back from what you truly desire and want. Because to play the game of life is to find resolution within one's heart, you could say. Now, within the mythology of ancient times in the West, you had stories that would aid towards the realization or the activation of this spirit within, so that their people could realize a spiritual realm within their life that was connected to their actions within corporal, physical reality, the material world, and the spiritual at the same time. This was most often realized through the affirmation of what they would have called the heroic warrior in battle, that in the act of war one needed to initiate this energy within, not only to achieve something like Valhalla, or to go to Valhalla, or to become a demigod worthy of veneration due to their courage and bravery in which they would deserve through honour and glory, and their immortality that would be given to them by the higher gods. Now this dialectic, you could say, or opposition in spirit within is what is needed to be integrated for the warrior in battle. For example, in Nordic mythology, if you were not courageous enough in battle, you would actually go to a place called Niflheim, if I've said that right. A place basically from Nordic mythology that was at the bottom of the world tree. It was often the case that those who died unheroic deaths, or those who lived unheroic lives, uncourageous lives, people who were cowardice to their own passions within, would go to this place after death. They would go to the Bible's equivalent of hell, basically. This obviously shows that the unheroic and the cowardly were obviously seen as some kind of form of evil, in some sense, or simply as those who couldn't live up to their potential within. Those who couldn't and didn't integrate the two spirits of opposition within their soul, or spirit. They couldn't integrate the Dionysian passions of the body with their intellectual mind of Apollonian tendency, let's say. Now this is absolutely fascinating because it gives a purpose, it gives a meaning, and even a revitalization of the lost high-charged spirit within for the person of the modern 21st century. If we are to reapply this mythology, it gives a key offered by their ancestors that opens up the hero's journey, if you will. As their mythology was aimed towards their own people, we today in response and also can also be recreative with this, applying it to the modern world and teaching others the importance of this message, so that it aids towards the making of courage, ambitious individuals who want to make the world what they desire to see, and the one in which is placed, and not the one in which it is simply placed upon us by oligarchs and big elitist groups. To rid of the increased degeneracy, if you will, of what Nietzsche called the last man of degenerative consumption. Now, when we dig deeper into this, we find even more interesting mythology that can be applied. For example, the Norse people would animalize this Dionysian spirit with creatures of the land in relation to them, which they would call fia in Icelandic, which in English actually means follow. To follow this spirit, which would lead to personal fortune, their future fortune, if they followed it, to accept that energy for what we could call again resolution, the same meaning that the Latin word that I talked about earlier connotes. This would be a supernatural force or spirit that would aid and guide the individual through life in relation to their fate and fortune, very similar to the feminine muses of inspiration which sits on one's shoulder, if you will, or the anima in Jungian psychology, which functions as the relating function or the creative function within one's psychology and personality. This is the more of a spiritual force that one needs to adopt and affirm for oneself to become the integration of all opposites for the sake of affirming the higher principles of life. And then, of course, after battle, you have the female Valkyries who come down to reward the heroes of the day, to take those up who had enough courage, and take them up to Odin in Valhalla for the preparation of the fight of Ragnarok. But what is even more interesting is the metaphysics of Fravashi in Zoroastrianism, because we have a similar dialectic or dynamic at play here with relation to the spirit and the soul. Fravashi is the concept of the personality or spirit of the individual, and through their spiritual dynamic, it was that this spirit, this Fravashi within, sends out the soul, or the Urvan as they call it, to fight the good and evil within the material world. In this instance, I'm not interested in the moralizing aspect of this, but more interested here in how the dynamic between soul and spirit works and how we can apply it to the Dionysian passions that I'm talking about here. It is as if in their conception the spirit is the personality and individual, but the soul in which the Fravashi pushes forth into the world, into the material world, is the more Dionysian passion of life, because the Dionysian passions is not very much the individual's personality, but more instead of an energy which affirms the personality or soul of the individual into reality. It's that charge, it's that lumos, that animal magnetism, due to its ambitious, courageous, affirming nature. In a sense, the Zoroastrianism metaphysic aligns the Dionysian spirit, which they call the soul, or the Arvan, as the engine of the car metaphorically, and that the personality or the Fravashi itself is the Apollonian aspect, the individualism of the person, the personality and the character of the person itself, in which is going to be pushed out into the world through the drive and the passions of Dionysus, the engine of the car, let's say. So a little idea here that we can take as wisdom is that the Dionysian passions must be initiated for the Apollonian character, if you will, of oneself to flourish unto the world, to be known, to be seen, to be understood, and to play the game of life itself, to be happy and to have a meaningful life in many degrees, to dance with the rest of the world in tandem with every other Dionysian passion and spirit that lives in every other soul of the individual. Because if you don't, you might just end up like Nietzsche, someone who secluded himself from the world, wrote loads of books, but lost his mind, was very interesting, but became this incel who would not affirm his Dionysian spirit and his passions to integrate himself into reality. Even though he had a very interesting character, he didn't allow those energies to extrovert his character into the world. Or you may end up being resentful instead because you have rejected the Dionysian passion within and not allowed to be pushed, or not allow it within yourself to be pushed forward into existence. So these, I think, are some of the very interesting dynamics within these old mythologies that can be harnessed into a new understanding of life-living affirmation for creative power. These ideas have been, in a sense, buried, been made unknown. We don't teach them the way they should be taught, if you will, if we are ever taught them to begin with in the education systems. Instead, we should be reapplying these mythologies in a creative, practical way for our modern society and for modern people as a guiding path to affirmative action, to turn our world into something we desire to see, instead of allowing the world to adapt to forces that are made by the very high few and deceitful, on the most often case, who don't have the best intentions at serving the people of the world, not want to talk about these ancient mythologies, affirming one's own experience into the physical world, and to forward the desires that people wish to demand and see. These are the energies in which we need to internalize that will inspire individuals, and if we can recreate them in powerful manners, then we are very much, in a sense, like Prometheus. We would take the creative fire from the kind of tyrannical gods above, and then we will give them to humanity, in a sense. So that is all I want to talk about today. I'm probably going to go more into these mythologies and reapply them for today in the 21st century of modern society, and try and reaffirm them, because I do think they're very potent, they're very powerful, and they're very affirmative for particular forms of living that can really benefit society. So that's all I'm going to say. Devotio equals victory. So I'll speak to you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and actually make sure, if you're interested in subscribing to more of my content, go on to Odyssey, subscribe onto there. I have a link in the description, because Odyssey is just a platform that doesn't censor content, and it's kind of basically the alternative of YouTube that is probably on the highest tier of winning any kind of internet battle between the two, if YouTube is ever to fall down into some sort of dissolution, if you will. So make sure to subscribe over onto there. Thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you in the next one.